Lucas Marshall, a wealthy and arrogant businessman, had accepted a daring bet, a decision that would change his life forever. Always a winner in both business and life, Lucas viewed competition as his primary driving force. During a lavish party in New York, his close friend Jack provoked him with a strange challenge. "I bet you don't have the guts to marry a woman who doesn't fit your standards." This struck a nerve with Lucas, who was known for only dating beautiful and flawless women. When Lucas asked about the reward, Jack simply smirked, raised his champagne glass, and said, $1 million, but you must marry and sustain the marriage for at least 6 months. Driven by the thrill of the challenge and the financial incentive, Lucas agreed without hesitation. The woman Jack chose was Chloe Richards, someone who did not meet conventional beauty standards. She was confident, independent, and strong-willed, qualities that made Lucas increasingly curious. Unaccustomed to losing control, he wondered if he could break Chloe's defiance. Their first meeting took place at an upscale restaurant. When Chloe arrived, she was entirely different from the women Lucas had dated before. Unfazed by the luxury or Lucas's commanding presence, she looked at him with calm eyes. "You're Lucas Marshall?" she asked, her voice confident and direct. Lucas, with his usual composed smile, replied, "And you must be Chloe Richards." When he extended his hand for a handshake, she hesitated for a moment before firmly gripping his hand, making her determination clear. Chloe got straight to the point. "I know about the bet and the terms. If you think you can control me, you're wrong." Her sharp words intrigued Lucas even more. Chloe was proving to be a greater challenge than he had anticipated. The meeting ended with both standing their ground, Lucas captivated by her boldness and strength. During their second meeting, Chloe chose a simple cafe instead of Lucas's usual extravagant venues. She smirked playfully when he arrived and teased, "I thought you only dined at 5-star restaurants." Lucas smiled, realizing he was entering an entirely different game. Chloe continued, "If we're going through with this arrangement, I need to make a few things clear. I don't care about money or luxury. 6 months is just 6 months, and I'll leave as easily as I came." Lucas, accustomed to being in control, began to feel genuinely challenged. Their wedding took place coldly, like a business transaction. Right after the ceremony, Lucas took Chloe to his luxurious penthouse in the heart of New York, with massive glass windows reflecting the city lights and the most lavish furnishings. He believed this would be the battlefield where he would win, using his wealth and power to make Chloe submit. But Chloe remained unfazed. The moment she stepped into the penthouse, her expression stayed cold, her eyes full of defiance. 6 months, not a day more, she declared firmly. Lucas, confident he could tame her like all the women before, began showering her with expensive gifts and luxury trips, all of which she rejected. "I don't need these things, Lucas," she said, leaving him both angry and confused. Lucas had never been challenged like this before. To him, this was no longer just a bet. It was personal. He needed to prove he was in control. Lucas started playing harder, preventing Chloe from going to work, claiming, "You don't need to work anymore. Your role is to be my wife." Chloe resisted, but Lucas interfered with her schedule, arranging meaningless meetings just to keep her home. Yet Chloe remained unyielding. She held her ground, confronting Lucas with rare resilience. Their minor arguments escalated gradually. One night, Lucas finally burst out, "What do you really want? Chloe, why are you acting like all of this means nothing?" Chloe stared straight into his eyes, her voice full of intensity. "I want respect. I'm not a pawn on your chessboard. Money can't buy dignity or integrity. You can have all these things, but inside, you're empty. And that's what you can't stand." Her words struck Lucas like a powerful blow to his ego. For the first time, he felt like he was facing a true opponent. It was no longer just a bet. He began to realize he might have underestimated Chloe. But instead of retreating, he tightened his grip further, attempting to isolate Chloe from the outside world, even cutting off her relationships and opportunities. But could Lucas truly break Chloe? Or would he be the one forced to change? Would this power struggle lead to destruction, or would it awaken something deeper within both of them? Chloe was not the type of woman who could be easily subdued. She refused to let herself be weak or humiliated by anyone, not even Lucas Marshall. After the mental blow caused by Lucas's controlling words and condescending attitude, she rose stronger than ever. Her eyes blazed with determination. Chloe understood that this was no longer just a game, but a battle to protect her dignity and self-respect. She would not allow Lucas to define her identity or turn her into a pawn in the game he had orchestrated. One night, in the quiet of the grand living room, Chloe decided to play by her own rules. She approached Lucas with a mysterious smile. Her voice was gentle yet carried a distinct note of challenge. "Lucas, do you think you're controlling everything?" She tilted her head, her gaze piercing straight into his soul. "Do you believe I'm just a passive woman, waiting to comply with your every wish? Trust me, I have my own plans. And when the right time comes, you'll realize this entire game is far bigger than you imagined." Lucas was stunned. For the first time, his usually icy eyes wavered. A flicker of doubt, perhaps even surprise, flashed across his face. Chloe was no ordinary opponent. There was something powerful and enigmatic about her, making her impossible to grasp fully. And for the first time in this game he had initiated, Lucas felt a vague fear that he might not be the one to win. The following weeks passed under mounting tension. Their marriage felt like a tightened string, ready to snap. Obsessed with absolute control, Lucas tried every possible method to manipulate the situation in his favor. He attempted to control even the smallest details: conversations, social events, and Chloe's behavior in front of others. Yet strangely, Chloe remained unshaken. She was like an unyielding fortress, impervious to his influence. Her calm and steadfast demeanor only amplified Lucas's growing impatience and frustration. But something else was beginning to stir. Lucas started looking at Chloe differently. At first, it was a reluctant respect for her resilience, but gradually, a deeper emotion crept in. Something he had never experienced before. Chloe had done what no other woman ever had. She confused him, made him feel emotionally vulnerable. One night, after a heated argument, Lucas stood alone before the massive glass window of his penthouse. The city stretched endlessly before him, the lights twinkling under the night sky. This view had always given him a sense of power, but tonight, all he felt was emptiness. What was happening to him? Chloe was supposed to be just a woman, a pawn in the bet he had orchestrated, nothing more. So why did she make him feel so unsettled? Chloe had no idea that during these silent moments, Lucas was battling himself. She continued her daily life, seeming more distant with each passing day. But it wasn't coldness. It was an invisible wall that Lucas couldn't seem to break. And that infuriated him, confused him, but above all, frightened him. "You've changed, Lucas." Those were the words of Jack, his closest friend, and the one who had proposed the bet during a private gathering. "You used to control everything, but this time she's challenging you in ways no one else ever has." Lucas remained silent. He hated to admit it, but Jack was right. Something had changed. That night, Lucas returned home with a different mindset. He needed to remind himself that this was just a bet, a contract, nothing more. Emotions had no place here. He couldn't let feelings cloud his judgment. When he entered the living room, Chloe was lying on the sofa, calmly reading a book. She seemed completely indifferent to his presence. "Can we talk?" Lucas finally broke the prolonged silence between them. Chloe glanced up, her gaze steady yet profoundly understanding. She closed her book gently and met his eyes with quiet anticipation. "Of course." Lucas sat across from her, struggling to find the right words. His gaze faltered, a rare sight for someone so composed. The atmosphere was charged with a strange tension. He realized this relationship was no longer just a contract or a game. "What are we doing here, Chloe?" His voice was low, almost vulnerable. "At first this was just a bet, but now I'm not so sure anymore. I don't know what to think about us." Chloe remained silent for a moment, her eyes searching his as if carefully weighing her response. "Lucas, I never played games. From the beginning, I agreed to this marriage not for your money or power. I'm here for a reason far greater than you realize. And maybe it's time for you to open your eyes." Lucas felt a heavy weight pressing on his chest. What was she saying? Was there a secret he had yet to uncover? Or was this a genuine emotion he had never faced before? He abruptly stood up, clearly unsettled. "Chloe, I know you have your own secrets, but the more I try to understand you, the more I realize I'm losing control, and I hate that feeling." Chloe stepped closer, standing face to face with him, her gaze soft but unwavering. "Lucas, this isn't about control. You've lived your life dominating everything around you. But with me, you need to understand that sometimes control isn't the answer. Sometimes we need to let go." In that moment, as Lucas stared into her eyes, he realized that perhaps this game had never truly been his to control. Chloe, this strong and mysterious woman, had shaken every wall he had built around his heart. For the first time, Lucas truly looked at Chloe with different eyes. She was no longer a pawn in his power game. In that moment, she was a captivating mystery, a woman he had never truly understood. His voice dropped, almost a whisper as he asked, "So, what do you really want?" "Chloe." Chloe smiled, a mysterious smile carrying a trace of cold defiance. "I want you to figure that out for yourself, Lucas," she said, then turned away, leaving him alone in the empty room with his tangled thoughts. After that night, the distance between them grew even more apparent. Yet strangely, Lucas felt closer to Chloe than ever before. He became obsessed with uncovering her secrets, as if there was something crucial he had yet to grasp. He began questioning himself, wrestling with unfamiliar emotions rising within him, and above all, he felt like he was losing control. Their 6-month marriage was nearing its end, yet for Lucas, each passing day felt like an eternity. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. The thought of Chloe consumed him, lingering in his mind at all times. She was no longer an opponent, no longer just part of a reckless bet. She had become something far greater, a mystery disrupting the perfectly controlled world he had built. Driven by desperation, he hired private investigators to dig into Chloe's past, searching for any clues to explain her behavior. But everything seemed to lead to a dead end. Her past appeared erased, carefully concealed. Every answer only birthed more questions. One evening, after a tense business meeting, Lucas returned to his penthouse later than usual. The balcony light was still on, and there was Chloe, sitting silently on the lounge chair, gazing out over the dazzling New York skyline. She looked like a cold, untouchable queen watching over her kingdom. Lucas knew this night would be the moment he confronted the truth. Yet at the same time, fear gripped his chest, fear of what he was about to hear. He approached, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. She didn't turn immediately, but seemed to sense his presence. The space between them felt stretched, suffocating in its silence. "I need answers." "Chloe," Lucas spoke, his voice hoarse. "I can't keep playing this game. I need the truth." Chloe exhaled deeply, finally turning to face him. Her eyes, once cold and guarded, now carried a different emotion. Pain, bitterness. She crossed her arms, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but sharp. "The truth, Lucas?" she repeated with a faint, bitter laugh. "Do you really want the truth? Fine, but prepare yourself." He nodded, though doubt and unease swirled inside him. "You've always seen people as pieces on a chessboard, but this time, Lucas, you are the pawn, and I have been controlling this entire game from the beginning." A chill ran down Lucas's spine. He opened his mouth to object, but Chloe continued. "Do you remember the name Richards?" she asked, her voice colder now. Lucas frowned, struggling to place the name. It felt familiar, yet distant. "My father," Chloe said, her eyes blazing. "My father, an honest man who ran a small company until you came along. You ruined my family for greed, for your ruthless deals. My father lost everything because of you, and in the end, he took his own life." Lucas staggered back a step, his face pale. Old memories surfaced, blurry but undeniable. There had been so many deals, contracts, yet he had never considered the people behind the numbers. And now, Chloe stood before him, telling him he was responsible for her father's death. "Chloe, I didn't know," Lucas stammered, but she raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, Lucas, you knew. You've always known. But you chose to ignore it. You thought money could erase every sin. But I'm here to remind you, some pain can't be measured in dollars." Silence fell, heavy and unbearable. Lucas felt as if he were drowning in guilt and helplessness. The man who once believed he could control everything now stood before Chloe, the woman he had deeply wronged, utterly speechless. Chloe turned away, leaving Lucas standing there alone, consumed by a profound sorrow and regret he had never experienced before. In the days that followed, Chloe continued to escalate her silent punishment. Every time Lucas crossed her path, her gaze was filled with nothing but disdain and cold detachment, as if his presence no longer mattered. Lucas had tried everything to show her he was changing, that he wanted to be better, but all his efforts were met with indifference and sarcasm. One night, after a disastrous meeting at the company, where a critical project had mysteriously fallen apart, Lucas returned home to find Chloe laughing softly while speaking on the phone. Listening closely, he realized she was discussing decisions related to his workplace. That was when it dawned on him. Chloe had been behind the sabotage all along, carefully dismantling his work from the shadows, so subtle that no one but Lucas himself could notice. She was making him suffer in silence. When Chloe ended the call, Lucas was already waiting in the living room. He stood there exhausted, his face marked with barely contained pain. "You're tearing everything apart, aren't you?" His voice was low but couldn't mask the desperation within. Chloe crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "Destroying your life? No, Lucas, I'm only giving back what you did to my family. Don't worry, I won't ruin you financially. That would be too easy. I want you to feel the loss, piece by piece, just like I did. I want you to watch everything you've built crumble and know it's all your fault." Lucas felt as if the ground beneath him had shattered. This was no longer a game. He had always been the one in control, the victor in every situation. But now, he was the prey, the target of a calculated and merciless revenge. Chloe wasn't trying to break him instantly. She was making him suffer, slowly, piece by piece, until he was left with nothing but regret. The following weeks were tormenting. Lucas, once so proud and confident, had become a mere shadow of himself. He wandered through the vast mansion, desperate for some form of reconciliation. But all he received was Chloe's cold silence and complete indifference. She barely looked him in the eyes anymore. Whenever Lucas tried to speak, she either responded with cutting remarks or a heavy, painful silence. The guilt consumed him. Lucas knew he had caused her deep wounds, scars that couldn't be erased. But her silence made the pain unbearable. Yet something within him began to shift. For the first time, Lucas realized that his apologies were meaningless. Chloe didn't need empty words or hollow promises. She needed action, genuine change. One morning, Lucas awoke with a newfound resolve. He couldn't keep begging for forgiveness. He had to prove, through his actions, that he was truly changing. His first step was to give Chloe the space she needed, to respect the emotional distance she had drawn. But he also knew he needed to express his sincerity through small, thoughtful gestures. Not forcefully, but quietly. Lucas began to notice the little things about her. He observed how she loved white peonies, how she preferred strong, unsweetened coffee every morning. The tiny details he had once overlooked now felt like important pieces of understanding her heart. That afternoon, Lucas visited an upscale florist and carefully selected a bouquet of white peonies. He didn't hand them to her directly, knowing she would reject the gesture. Instead, he placed the flowers on the kitchen counter without a note. When Chloe returned home, she paused briefly before the bouquet. She said nothing, but Lucas saw the moment she lifted a single bloom to her face and inhaled its scent gently. It was the first sign. In the days that followed, Lucas continued his quiet efforts. He prepared her coffee just the way she liked it in the mornings. He cleaned up after dinner without being asked. He made subtle gestures that only someone truly paying attention would notice. Chloe remained distant, but her silence was no longer as heavy. She didn't reject the flowers, the coffee, or his quiet consideration. One chilly evening, Chloe stood on the balcony, wrapped in a thin blanket, gazing out at the city lights. After a long moment of hesitation, Lucas approached her with a cup of hot tea. His voice was calm, softer than usual. "I thought you might need this." Chloe looked at him, her expression still guarded but no longer hostile. She accepted the cup, took a slow sip, and said nothing. They stood together in silence, the wind brushing against them. But for the first time, Lucas didn't feel entirely shut out. "Why are you doing this, Lucas?" Her voice broke the quiet, steady but serious. Lucas inhaled deeply. "Because I realized words don't matter anymore. I need to prove it with my actions. And I truly..." He hesitated, his voice lowering. "I truly want to be better, not just for you, but because I know I need to change." Chloe remained quiet, staring into the horizon. The walls she had built were still there, but her gaze had softened just enough to give him hope. Lucas knew forgiveness would not come easily, but for the first time he felt he was finally taking the right steps. Chloe still wasn't ready to fully forgive Lucas, but she couldn't deny that something had begun to change. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she finally broke the lingering silence between them, softly saying, "I can see you're trying, Lucas. Maybe it's a start." Those words, brief yet profound, made Lucas's heart pound in his chest. He knew the road to regaining her trust was still long, but at least hope had sparked. That night they sat together, speaking of simple things, everyday topics. To Lucas, it was a small but meaningful victory. He felt like he was beginning to rebuild something he had once shattered. Gradually, Chloe began to lower her emotional defenses. She was no longer completely cold, and the icy, wounded gaze she once wore seemed to soften. Yet Lucas could still sense a shadow looming between them. Chloe was clearly keeping a secret, something deep, something painful, and he knew he would have to be prepared for whatever truth she was holding back. But for now, she seemed slightly more open, and for Lucas, that was enough reason to keep trying. Over the following weeks, their relationship remained a blend of hope and tension. Chloe was no longer completely distant, but she also wasn't fully open. It felt as though she was waiting for the right moment to reveal something significant. Lucas could feel it, but he chose not to push her. Instead, he continued proving his change through actions. He canceled unnecessary business commitments to spend more time with her. Small, thoughtful gestures became part of his routine. Cooking breakfast together, helping her tidy the house, or simply sitting quietly with her during the evenings. The ice between them slowly melted. Yet despite the progress, Lucas still felt an emptiness lingering. Chloe remained guarded, avoiding deeper conversations. Then, on a rainy night, as the droplets tapped rhythmically against the glass windows, Lucas noticed her sitting alone on the couch. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes distant and clouded with emotions he couldn't read. The silence became unbearable. Finally, Lucas broke it, his voice low and filled with unspoken emotions. "Chloe," he began, hesitant yet sincere. "I know, there's still something between us, something you're holding back. I can feel it. Please, if there's anything you're hiding, just tell me." Chloe took a deep, trembling breath, her hands clenching tightly in her lap. At first, she avoided his gaze, as if battling an internal war. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Lucas didn't dare press further, afraid of pushing her away. Finally, she lifted her head, and the look in her eyes struck him harder than words ever could. Pain, vulnerability, but also a quiet strength. "You're right, Lucas," she whispered, voice breaking slightly. "I've been hiding something I never thought I'd be able to say out loud, but maybe it's time." The room felt like it had frozen in place. Lucas braced himself, knowing whatever came next would change everything. Chloe inhaled shakily, her voice trembling yet steady. Do you remember the company my father used to run? The one you destroyed? Lucas nodded, guilt tightening around his chest like a vice. It was a past he deeply regretted. But that wasn't all you destroyed, Chloe continued, her voice wavering. She lowered her gaze, as if holding back tears. And then, after a painfully long pause, she revealed the truth she had kept buried for so long. Lucas, I was pregnant back then. The words hit Lucas like a thunderclap. He stood frozen, his mind reeling, unable to process the gravity of her confession. And when my family collapsed, when my father took his life, the stress, the pain, it cost me the baby. Her voice finally broke, tears streaming down her face. Lucas felt the ground crumble beneath him. His lips parted, but no words came out. The devastation he saw in her eyes was unbearable. Chloe, I didn't know. His voice cracked, raw with despair. I never could have imagined. I'm so sorry. Chloe met his gaze, her eyes red but unyielding. No, Lucas, you didn't know because you never cared enough to ask. You only saw power and money. And while you continued living your lavish life, I lost everything. Lucas dropped to his knees before her, tears clouding his vision. I'll do anything to make this right. Please, Chloe, give me a chance to atone for what I've done. Chloe didn't respond immediately. She studied him, her expression torn between lingering pain and a fragile hope. Finally, after a long silence, she whispered, I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, Lucas, but I see you're trying. Maybe only time can tell. Lucas nodded, swallowing hard. He knew the journey ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope, and he would fight for it. Chloe remained cautious, closely observing Lucas's actions. She knew he was trying to change, but forgiveness wouldn't come easily. However, as the days passed and Lucas consistently demonstrated genuine transformation, she began to notice something different about him. There was respect and admiration in his demeanor, emotions she had never seen in him before. He wasn't just speaking words. He was proving, through his actions, that he was becoming a different man. One evening, Chloe stood on the balcony, gazing at the twinkling city lights. The night was calm, filled only with the whisper of the wind and the quiet storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Lucas approached silently, his face calmer, more determined than ever. He had just returned from a meeting where he had made amends with one of the families he had once wronged. How was it today? Chloe asked softly, still keeping her gaze on the horizon, her voice gentle yet guarded. Lucas sighed, a long, weary breath that seemed to carry the weight of his regrets. Every conversation, every apology feels like a small step, not just to show you I've changed, but to become someone better, someone who can live with himself. Chloe turned to face him. There was something different in her eyes too. The pain and anger she had once carried so fiercely were still present, but had softened, just slightly. For the first time, she saw Lucas not as the cold, arrogant man she had once despised, but as someone who was genuinely trying to redeem himself. I can see that. Lucas, she replied gently, yet firmly. Maybe it's time we stopped clinging to the past. Maybe we can start again. A wave of relief washed over Lucas, so powerful it almost made his knees weak. Those were the words he hadn't realized he had been yearning to hear. Chloe was finally willing to give them a chance, not as a couple bound by a reckless bet, but as two people ready to rebuild something real from the ashes. As the 6-month marriage agreement neared its end, something unexpected happened. Chloe and Lucas grew closer. Their conversations became more open, more honest. The once icy tension between them had melted into shared laughter, heartfelt exchanges, and moments of quiet warmth. The power struggles had ceased, replaced by mutual respect and a connection that was blossoming, quietly but profoundly. On the final night before the contract expired, Lucas prepared a special dinner in the penthouse. Candlelight flickered gently, and the table was set with meticulous care. Tonight was the night, the turning point he had been waiting for. Taking Chloe's hands in his, Lucas met her gaze with sincerity. The flickering candlelight danced in his eyes as he spoke. Chloe, you know our agreement ends tomorrow, but I don't want it to end. I've fallen in love with you, deeply, genuinely, and I want us to continue. Not because of the bet, not because of any obligation, but because we're meant to be. Chloe's heart raced as she stared into his eyes, seeing the undeniable truth in them. The man standing before her was no longer the Lucas she had once despised. He was vulnerable, sincere, changed, and she realized perhaps she had changed too. "I love you too, Lucas," she whispered, her voice trembling, "and I want to try. Not because of a deal, not because of the past, but because we both deserve a chance at something real." It was all Lucas needed to hear. Finally, they had shed the pain of their past to face a hopeful future. No longer bound by a forced marriage, they had become two people choosing each other freely. Weeks passed, and their relationship flourished. The wounds of the past were healing, though scars remained. And then, one morning, Chloe felt something different, an unusual nausea, a subtle shift she couldn't ignore. The feeling was familiar, and after taking a test, she knew the truth. She was pregnant. When she told Lucas, his reaction was nothing short of pure joy. He pulled her into his arms, his laughter mixed with tears of overwhelming happiness. After everything they had endured, heartbreak, betrayal, pain, this new life felt like a miracle, a symbol of their second chance. Lucas cupped her face, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to do this right, Chloe. No bets, no conditions. I want to marry you because I love you, because I want to spend the rest of my life by your side." Tears streamed down Chloe's face as she nodded, her heart full. "I want that too, Lucas. I want us to be a family, truly." This time, they held an intimate wedding, far from the lavish displays of wealth Lucas once sought. No extravagant spectacle, just the presence of close friends and family. It was a new beginning, one built on love, forgiveness, and the promise of a shared future. Lucas knew he still had much to prove, but this time, he wasn't fighting to erase his past. He was fighting to become a man worthy of Chloe and the life they were building together. Lucas and Chloe had overcome the storms, the pain, and the scars of their past to finally find each other in a love that was genuine and pure. No longer were their words empty apologies or surface-level gestures. Instead, their hearts had truly transformed. Chloe had learned to open her heart again, while Lucas had come to understand the true meaning of love and responsibility. They had faced countless challenges together, from misunderstandings and heartbreak to the deeply emotional moment of forgiveness. The morning after their wedding, the first rays of sunlight gently streamed through the window, illuminating the room where Lucas and Chloe sat side by side. No words were needed, only the quiet exchange of heartfelt gazes. In Chloe's eyes was trust, and in Lucas's, a steadfast promise. They had not only discovered love, but also found peace, mutual respect, and the profound beauty of true forgiveness. In the days that followed, Lucas and Chloe built a new life together, one grounded in mutual growth, understanding, and shared strength. No longer two individuals walking separate paths, they had become a true partnership, ready to face every challenge hand in hand. True love, as they learned, is not defined by fleeting romantic moments, but by the journey through struggles, growth, and unwavering commitment. It requires patience, forgiveness, and the courage to change. The mistakes of the past do not define who we are. Rather, it is how we choose to confront, mend, and grow from them that truly matters. Happiness is not born from perfection, but from sincerity, vulnerability, and the relentless effort to evolve together, day by day. The story of Lucas and Chloe serves as a powerful reminder that real love is not just a feeling, but a choice, one we make every day to stay, to understand, and to fight for one another. Thank you for following this heartfelt journey. We hope Lucas and Chloe's story has inspired you and shared meaningful messages about love, forgiveness, and personal growth. If you found their journey moving, please leave a comment and share this story with your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and heartfelt stories. Your support is a powerful motivation for us to continue spreading positivity and meaningful messages through storytelling. Thank you, and may your life be filled with love, happiness, and hope.